Hey there, it's Jane. I hope you're doing fabulous. I have been a crafter since a little girl, and I have done needlepoint and crotch stitch for many, many years. But I got really tired of pillows and pictures, and I set it aside and became a paper crafter instead. When I found out that I can marry needlepoint and embroidery with paper crafting, I was smitten. I have been stitching backgrounds for quite a few years now, and here's a few examples of what I've been doing. These backgrounds, as you can see, take a long time, 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours depending, but it's a stress reliever for me. I do it while I'm watching television, when I'm traveling. It just depends. When I'm talking to my girlfriends, I'm always busy. And then I take these backgrounds when I amass enough of them and I turn them into cards. And here's a couple of the cards that I've made. Well, the Stamp Market came out with their 2 die sets, rainbows and one that says hello, and Jennifer McGuire recently did a video on them, and I was inspired by her video, as I am by all of her videos actually. Excuse me. So I ordered a bunch of products and I sat down and I made a bunch of cards. I'm not lying when I said a bunch of cards, and it is very, very addicting. I will show you how to do the stitches in a minute, and I'm not going to go into all the details. They will all be in my blog. But here's some examples of some of the cards that I've made. I use the Lawn Fawn double stitch rectangle around there. Doesn't cut it out, just gives it some edging. And I did the running back stitch on the rainbow there. And all of them have either craft foam or 3M tape, and all of the envelopes have something on the back. I love this sentiment. It's called the Stamp Market Have a Nice Day, and you get to choose what you want with the Lawn Fawn reverse stitch scallop around the edges, again the envelope. And I will also show you how you can cut your envelope down if it's too wide to make it a little bit smaller so that your cards don't swim around in the envelope. This next card is an example of the chain stitch. You can see it's a little thicker than the running back stitch. This is another stitch. It's called a loop stitch. It's what I'm calling it. It's a rainbow, and I cut out the rainbow. I die cut the rainbow first, and I put it through my embossing folder with the little dots on it. This is the back of that loop stitch, and this is my favorite way to stitch because I get perfectly straight lines, and I use some Nuvo crystal drops there. Here's another example of that scallop die cut with the orange cardstock behind. I use my scraps of thread to stitch the hello. I stitched the same colors around the border. And this is one of my favorites. I did the My Favorite Things romantic script on the back with Simon Says Stamp Fog ink, and then I cut the high out and I colored it with my Copics to match had some variegated thread. And this is all DMC Pearl Cotton number 5. It's the thicker one. This is the Stamp Market Stamp Gram with the postcard die. It looks like a postcard, and I love that. This was one of my favorites. I used a vellum envelope, and I actually made it so I can put it in the envelope so it looks like a postcard. And I stamped 2 in the back. I'm going to show you, put it in the envelope. You can write your address on the vellum. And you can use this die to actually stamp and color and to make a postcard, which I plan on doing at a future date. Here's another example of a Stamp Gram stamp set with variegated ink. Another hello. Didn't I go crazy? I just had so much fun. And these aren't even all my cards. These are just some of them. I just tried to show you an example of what can be done with this stamp and die set. I did go through my stash and find quite a few other products that actually coordinated with all of these. I was looking for some small sentiments and sentiments that had to do with rainbows. That particular card is definitely inspired by Jennifer McGuire. She and her daughter Lila made some really cool cards. I stamped that high there, and I colored that with some Copic markers. Again, the products are all linked in the description in my blog. I can only put so many things on YouTube. Here's another one of those high cards. I really like that with the Simon Says stamp, Love Is background. The red postcard die, another high. And I did this one backwards, and I always give my kids the backwards cards. They get all the rejects. Another of those stamp market. And that's it, guys. So let me show you how I made these. I'm not going to go into all the cards, but I'll do some. So the first thing I did is I die cut the rainbow, the dotted rainbow, into some Nina on 110 pound cardstock. I use Nina 110 for everything because it's nice and thick. Then I take my Tim Holtz craft pick and I try to poke out as many holes as I can because I hate leaving a trail of polka dots wherever I go. These are my favorite needles, and I will try to find them and link them to you below. I love them because they're thicker and they have a blunt tip, so I'm not poking myself and I'm not splitting the yarn when I'm go in and out. I put the yarn, the thread through the needle, and I'm going to show you the running back stitch first. And so I start at the back of the card, and I'm going to go through the first hole, and I'm going to tape down my end. I use some purple tape to tape that down. And of course I picked a die cut that has a bunch of edges on it to keep getting caught. So I go in the next hole, and I go back up the next hole from the back. And I go down that hole, back up from the back. And you repeat that till you get to where you're finished, or you're the end, or wherever you might be. And then when you're finished, you'll come back into the same holes. So now I'm going to go back down the hole that I already went in. There you go. And I can do it without looking because I've been doing it again for years and years. I promise you, you will get really good, and you can go back and find your back hole. One of my pointer finger or my middle finger of my left hand are always moving, and it's always kind of guiding my right hand where the hole is, if that makes any sense at all. So now I'm going to show you another stitch if I can possibly get it in frame. This is called the chain stitch. I go down, I make a loop with my thumb, come back up, grab the loop, go back down in that same hole, make a loop, come back from the back in the middle of the loop, pull it tight to make a loop. Go back down the same hole, come up the next hole, in the middle of the loop, grab the loop. That's how you do a chain stitch. And then I'm going to show you, I call it the backward stitch. It's kind of loopy on the front, but I like it the way it looks from the back side. So I am working on the back of the card. I come up, I skip a hole, make a loop, come in the next hole. Let's do that again. Skip a hole, make a loop, come back in the next. So I'm skipping a hole, down in the next hole, back in the one that I skipped. Let's do it again. Skip a hole, back in the one I skipped. Skip a hole, back in the one I skipped from the back. Now this looks really good on this side, and this is typically the front of the card or the front of your stitching. But I'm working on the back side because I love how that is so perfectly straight. If you compare that to that running back stitch I love the running back stitch, but I love that particular stitch. And that is the stitch that I used on most of my card making. Now, when you're all finished and you need to secure your ends, you take off your tape, you get yourself a glue stick. I'm using Gina K Connect glue for this. Put a little dab of glue on there and kind of stick it down with your finger. Stick it down with your finger. I keep some baby wipes handy so my fingers aren't completely sticky the whole time. Put a little purple tape down there to secure it, and I usually give it a couple hours to dry. I don't like to start working with it right away. You can. It's just for me, I go glue it all, then come back later on and start putting them all together. And then you just kind of take the purple tape off and cut off the ends, and you don't have any extra bulk or anything like that. And because it's thick cardstock, you don't see it, but if it's thinner cardstock, you do. So let's start out with this card. This is a Stamp Market postcard die, and it goes with the stamp set called Stampgram. And what I did was I stamped on the cardstock with the My Favorite Things Romantic Script stamp set, cut out the heart, did my stitching. And now I'm putting it all back together. So I cut out a silver cardstock with a postcard die, and then here's the romantic script, put that on the back. I use variegated thread, and then I use my Copic markers to color that in to give it a little more variegation. And then I put my Wink of Stella on top just to give it a little color. And then that card opens up for a place for you to write your message. I cut this cardstock down to fit the size of the postcard die. I stuck it on really good with some great liquid glue. And this is one of my favorite glues, the Nuvo adhesive. It has never clogged for me, and it's a really nice bottle, although I do love the Gina K. I'll be gluing that to the back of the card that says hi. I cut it just shy of the little scallops on the postcard die. I always put an acrylic block or something heavy on top to let it all dry. And coming back to it, here's the card, which I think is very cool. Now that postcard die does not fit into a regular envelope, so I will show you how to cut down an envelope. I had stitched the Lawn Fawn reverse scallop die, put some foam tape on the back, and then put my hello behind that. I then grabbed some, I think it's My Favorite Things Red Hot cardstock, but I will again have that linked for you in a minute. Rounded the corners and layered all of that on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card. Liquid glue works really well when you have all the stitching too. It tends to grab the stitches where a tape runner does not really adhere well to your threads. I love the way that one came out. That's one of my favorites. I have a lot of favorites. Must have been into rounding corners the day that I made these cards because everything seems to have some rounded corners. I have my Nuvo Crystal Drops, and you always burp it on a spare piece of paper, scrap paper, so you don't get a big glob on your card. I grabbed 3 colors, and I will link those below to tell you which colors I'm using. They will be linked actually in my blog post. And there's that one. The Lawn Fawn reverse stitch square, scallop square. That's how the die I used. And again, I'm not giving you all the details on how I'm doing it because I have so many cards. I cut my 3M foam tape into thirds, put it on the back of this scallop square die, added some blue cardstock behind that for a little pop of interest, and I'm putting that on there to dry. Here's another hello card. I'm sorry, that is the same hello card. I wanted to show it to you finished. This is a simple one. I used the chain stitch for the heart. I used the Stampgram stamp to give you the envelope look of that one. And then that one opens from the top. And that one can go into a vellum envelope and actually look like it's a postcard. So I used my Misty to do all of my stamping, and my fingers got messy, and I have black ink all over this card. So I got out my mono sand eraser, and if you don't have one, it is a must for every crafter because it takes off so much boo-boos, so many mistakes. And I'm using a very heavy hand there, and I have really good Nina cardstock, so it is not tearing that cardstock whatsoever. And here's a look at that blue card that I had made before I made a boo-boo with all of my inks. I love the fact that I get to check and decide how I want that to be, and this particular person is the best ever. So then I found my Avriel postage stamp die because I thought, well, let me make a card that actually fits in a 4 1/4 by 11 inch envelope. And again, I have a couple of boo-boos, so I took some hearts. This is how I hide my boo-boos. I use Nouveau Crystal Drops, or I use dots, or I use gems or jewels. In this particular situation, I had a couple of hearts left over. I stamped the 2 on the back of the card. And that's the Avriel postage stamp die. Putting that in the envelope, it fits perfectly. And then I'm going to write on the outside of that envelope, and it's very fun. This is the reversed back stitch on this particular card. I'm letting it dry. I use the My Favorite Things rectangle. This is the My Favorite Things fishtail die, and it cuts out a border and the interior, but in order to get the inside stuck, I put a piece of red cardstock behind it, put a bunch of tape runner, and then I cut the fishtails down to match, and I pop that up with some foam tape just to give it a little more dimension. And there it is drying with the acrylic block. All right, this is how you take your envelopes that are too big. These are 6 by 6 envelopes, and I'm kind of giving it an eyeball of how much do I really want to cut off. I think I cut 3/8 of an inch off, or maybe a 1/2 inch off each side. And I'm measuring just to see how big is the card. And I love this T-square. And how big is the envelope. And I'm putting it through my Fiskars trimmer, which I do love this. And I'm cutting a 1/2 inch off each side. And then I'm going to take my 1/8 inch score tape and open up that envelope. Get rid of all those little pieces that were cut off. And I'm going to put it right up against the edge. And I got this tip and trick from Gina K. Tips and tricks. I love how we share things in the card making world. And then my card fits right in the envelope, and it doesn't look like it's floating. And here are all the cards that I made, everybody. This is just everything. It was so fun. I ran out of time. I actually have a lot more stitching to do. I'm going on vacation, and I hope to finish that, and I will leave all my little holes behind on the airplane, and Delta will just absolutely love me. But there's a card for every occasion. You can even stamp them, and you can, sew them, and you can put your sentiment on later if you choose. But I just thought they were so much fun. If you have any questions, let me know. Leave comments in the YouTube comments below. And again, head on over to my blog, and there'll be a lot more details. Thanks for stopping by.